From the time I was very young, I was asked to perform. I can remember running around the stage of the community center in the small town where I was born, loving every minute of it. The new clothes, the new friends, and the new wild stories that I'd run home and tell my mother about pirates and Indians, about the Mad Hatter, the March Hare. But it wasn't until I was in kindergarten that I was asked to perform something. I was asked to step to the front of the stage and perform something that I was asked to memorize. Now, maybe it was because of the fact that I was the tallest kid in my class, or maybe it was because I could memorize with relative ease, or maybe it was because from the moment I could speak, I spoke in clear sentences, and I always spoke my mind, or so my mother tells me. I was singled out by my kindergarten teacher to be something of the class speaker. And so anytime that we'd have an all-school assembly or presentation of the Christmas pageant, I was the leader. I was the person put in charge to get up in front of the group and speak to the curricula of a group of 5- and 6-year-olds. And it wasn't until years later, when I was a junior in college, that I even thought about making performing a career. I was in a playwriting class, and I'd written a short play about a priest. My playwriting professor came up to me after class, and he said, "Have you thought about auditioning for the fall drama?" I said, no, I haven't. He said, "Well, I think you should." And I'm not sure if it was the words on the page, or the way I read it, or the subject matter. The play was about a priest. But I auditioned for the play and was cast in one of the lead roles as a preacher who'd lost his way. And from the moment I stepped on that stage, opening night, I knew I wanted to be an actor. I'm going to say that again. From the moment that I stepped out on the stage that night, and I looked out, and I just connected with everything going on around me, I knew this is what I was born to do. 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 And so from then on, from my junior year through my senior year, I was wholly devoted to the theater department. I wrote plays, I directed plays, I produced plays, I acted in plays, I costumed, I built sets. I did everything I could to get back to that moment, but nothing compared to that first play. And I had to ask myself, what was it? What was it in that first play that I connected with? Was it that the role was tailor-made for me? Was it that the cast was just perfect? Or was it just beginner's luck? Well, I graduated from college, and that feeling just ate at me, and it ate at me, and it ate at me for an entire year. At the end of being gone from college for a full year, I looked into a program. In my mind, it was the program. It was an acting program in New York City that my mentor in college studied at. And I wanted to learn from my mentor. I wanted to learn from the man whose method I believed in. He had taught some of the best actors in America in the last 50 years. And I'm going to take a drink. He had taught all of my favorite actors. As I went down the list, I was like, yeah, that guy. And so they told me that I needed to book a plane to New York. Never been to New York. Book an audition time. I showed up. I auditioned. I left with a handshake and "You're in, kid." I moved to New York that fall. I was one of 75 students in the first year. And they tell you on the first day of class, 2/3 of you guys won't be here next year. That's right, they accept 25 students into the second year. So I knew from that moment on, I needed to get everything I could out of every day, because there's a good chance I won't be here next year. Well, I'll tell you, I was the worst. If not among the worst. I was pretty terrible. I was very academic in my approach. I had studied theater in college, and I was convinced that I had it figured out. I knew what I was doing. I knew who I was. And they were quick to wipe all that away. And what I learned was that I don't listen, I don't look people in the eye, and I certainly don't know how to connect. There was that connection again. Was it the first play? Was that I was just so new and I was so green that I was connecting? Well, it didn't really happen for me in the first year, in spite of the fact that I did everything I could to convince these people that I belonged here. I was first one in, last one out. I did the work. I did the work. I even rescheduled a hernia surgery for a Friday evening so that I would not miss my acting class and I could recover over the weekend. My teacher said later, he said, that was a little nuts. Miraculously, I made it into the second year. I think it was the hernia surgery. In the second year, it's a lot more scripted work. It's a lot more scene study, and I was in a scene study class with one of my best friends at the time. And we were doing a scene from one of my favorite plays. We were brothers. He was playing the outlaw drifter, and I was playing the anal retentive screenwriter. We got through the first reading, and our teacher said, guys, flip it. Max, you play Lee. What? I was so used to my type that to work against my type was a totally foreign idea. But no sooner had we read it through one time, everything changed. My physicality changed, my voice changed, the way I stood, the way I felt totally changed. We worked on this scene for about a week and a half. And in that time, I grew a mean mustache. I flipped my t-shirt inside out. I was wearing cowboy boots and tight jeans, and I was a badass. I showed up to class. I just elbowed into my scene partner, and I felt it again. For the second time in my life, I felt it. The audience was right there with me. My teacher was right there with me. I heard a gasp in the front row. Somebody in the back row said, wow. I was an actor. We finished the scene, and I looked to it's customary in this class that the class applauds, blah, blah, but they stood up. They were out of their seats. They were slow clapping. It felt great. When the clap subsided, we all looked to the teacher. He was hunched over like this. He looked up at me, made eye contact with me, made eye contact with my scene partner, looked back at me again. He jumped out of his seat. He said, "Cocksucker motherfucker." Doesn't that feel good? Now, I'd heard the cocksucker motherfucker part many, many times, mostly in a negative context. But this was the first time I'd ever heard that word from him. Good. Good. Felt real good. I did it. I graduated, and the real world hit me like a tidal wave. I'm going to take you up to speed. It's about 2 years after I graduate. Haven't really gotten an audition in about a year and a half. Haven't really made any inroads in about a year and a half. But I learned to network. I learned you have to do literally everything in your power to get inside the minds of the people that do not care about you. I would show up... I like to say that sitting on business stoops and in business office lobbies became a national pastime for me. I would show up with 5 resumes and 5 headshots, and I'd sit there and I'd wait for the person that I was looking for to come through the door. And I would get in their face, and I'd make eye contact, and I'd say, "Call me, call me." And it never worked. So I did a different tactic. I figured I had to pay rent to live in their minds. So on my wild excursion through networking, I watched as they'd come in and out of the buildings with their bags and their coffee cups, and I would buy $5 gift certificates to their preferred coffee joint. And I'd put a note on there that said, just let me buy you a cup of coffee. Well, I bought about $150 worth of cups of coffee to no avail. No one called, no one said anything, until I was on an audition. And for whatever reason, this person's manager had come on the audition with them. He looked exactly like me. By the way, that happens. That actually happens. You show up in a room of people and there's 50 other Max Wastlers. It happens. So this other Max Wastler was there with his manager. He goes in for the audition. She says, hey, are you the Starbucks card guy? Yes, I am. We miss you around our office. Now, mind you, this is like December of 2008. She said, when are you coming back? I said, I'll be there. I got you booked for July of 2012. She laughed. She took my number into her BlackBerry back when BlackBerries were still in existence. She said, I'll call you tomorrow. I said, no, you won't. She called me tomorrow. That person became my manager. And in meeting with her over coffee that she paid for, thank God, I told her about my goals. In my room, in my apartment, my measly 100 square foot apartment in Brooklyn, I had a bulletin board, and on that bulletin board I had a Post-it note. And on the Post-it note it said, you will speak one word of dialogue from this writer, and you will perform in one scene directed by this director. She said, I'm going to make both of those goals come true for you. 6 months later, I had attempted both. 6 months later, within 6 months, it's amazing to me that it happened. It took that little amount of time, but within 6 months, I was sitting in an audition for the casting director of that director, and I was nailing it. I was so perfectly prepared. I did it, no flaws. She said, okay, because you're off book, let's do that again. But can you sit on the floor and do it? This is the first time, mind you, that I'm working with a casting director of this caliber, a casting director whose name I recognize from years of watching the credits. Yes, I'm the idiot that stays for the credits at the end of the movie. Watching the casting director work was like watching a master in front of a canvas, a master painter. She had me sit on the floor and whisper it. She had me stand on the opposite side of the room and shout it. I felt like she was putting me through my paces, and by the end of it, I felt like I had done a performance test for Car and Driver magazine. She said, thank you very much. I shook hands with her. I said everyone's first and last name, gave a gracious smile, and I walked out the door. Never heard from them again. The writer, I won't say who the writer was, but if I describe the style, you'll understand, you probably could guess who it is. It was very heady dialogue, very lawyerly, long, very fast-paced speaking. I desperately wanted to work with this man. And I memorized, and I memorized when she got me the audition. And I went into the audition, and I'm telling you, I was memorized. I walked through the door, I was memorized. I stood in front of them, I introduced myself, I was memorized. They said, okay, Max, you want to go ahead? I was the first person to speak in the scene. I was memorized. I said the line, oh, hold on a second. Looks like you got the wrong sides, pal. Here you go. I was memorized. Shaking is one of my greatest strengths. So the paper is going like a fan in church. And I'm reading the paper, and I make it through the first line, and I kind of make it through the second line, and then I don't really remember what happened, but I didn't make it through anything else. They said, thank you very much, have a good day, we'll see you later. I walked outside. I I should also mention, it's a funny anecdote I learned later, that the writer was on the phone while I was in my audition. I walked outside and I was on the sidewalk. It was midday. It was a day kind of like today, gray and cloudy and beautiful fall day in New York. And I just started to cry. It was one of those really good cries. And what I realized as I walked 8 miles home to my apartment in Brooklyn, with each step, I recounted all of the auditions that I went on. I went through each one. I went through the lines as best I could remember. I went through the casting director. I went through the person who was cast. The person who was cast in that lawyerly role was a former professional football player, 6'6" African American. Just like me. And by the time I got to the Brooklyn Bridge, I'd made up my mind. I got out my cell phone. I called my dad. He was at his office. It was about quitting time. And I said, "Dad, I'm done." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, I know you know that I just had this big audition today. He's like, "Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, so it didn't go well." No, it didn't go well. And I'm just tired. I was exhausted. I had given it everything I had. I had burned bridges and rebuilt them, and built bridges and reburned them. I'm a failed actor. Thank you.